Beautiful. We are recording. So really quick, just to introduce myself for anybody who ends up watching the recording, my name is John Godwin. I'm the district manager of the Anne Arundel County district team, and I have my office right here in Annapolis, Maryland, right in one of the suburbs. And my objective here is to run a list building workshop. Okay, my goal is to help you guys get 100, 200, 300, 400 plus people on your call list. And I'm going to pause the recording really quick. All right, unpause. I had to go out and get my notebooks. Almost forgot this. But anyway, so first off, for the two people who are physically here doing this workshop with me today, thank you for investing your time and energy into doing this with me. And then for those of you who are watching the recording down the road, chances are you work in a branch office or you're away from a local office and your manager wanted to help you build up your list and execute. So congratulations and thank you for investing your time and energy into this. I want to start off with a couple of observations. And by the way, for those of you who don't know me, I imagine most of you do, but I've personally sold $200,000 of the product myself. The people I've trained have sold over $4 million. So this isn't theory or guesswork. This is what I did myself when I was a rep, and this is what I've trained lots of people to do as well. Okay, so the first thing I'll share with you is that the number one reason that most reps don't feel like they have enough people to call is not that they don't have people they could show. It's that they haven't put in enough time and enough action into building up their list. And quite honestly, in my opinion, and not everybody may see it this way, but I do firmly believe this from my own experience, I really think that making the phone calls is the hardest part of the job. It's the most tedious, it's the most irritating and frustrating. It's the part that we get more emotionally wrapped up in the phone calls, and a lot of times before we make the phone call. And all of you guys have felt that fear, like before you dial the number and and all that stuff. The phone calls are the hard part. And the way I sincerely look at the job is that the phone calls are the work. That's the part where I need to do it every week, every time. Right, and the job isn't done until the phone calls are made. For those of you who are here, you've heard me say this before, but for the sake of the people watching the recording, when I was a full-time sales rep and I was doing this as a married man, supporting a family, my only job was selling Cutco, the way that I would do it, and by the way, I had a 2.5-hour commute to my office if I hit traffic. It was 1.5 hours if I didn't hit traffic. And the way I looked at my job was every Wednesday I went in for a team meeting and I would make 100 phone calls in 3 hours. My goal was to book 10 appointments, but if I booked 0 appointments or I booked 20 appointments, the job wasn't done until I made 100 phone calls. And then if I booked less than 10 appointments, I would have to continue making phone calls every day until I had 10 appointments booked. And I would book that Wednesday through Sunday. And then I would go in on Sunday and do the exact same thing. I'd make 100 dials in 3 hours. The goal was to book 10 appointments, but 100 dials. I wasn't done until I made 100 calls. And then I would continue making calls until I booked my 10, right? So that was my system. And that is the hard part. That is the part that is irritating. In fact, I'll tell you, for those of you who have met my wife, she's a cute little Asian girl, very adorable. She was kind enough that I asked her to come with me to the office one time because I was just having a tough time and I wanted some moral support. So my freaking wife, man, God bless her, she drove 1.5 hours to come to my office just to see me and spend time with me. And when she came in, she tried to give me a hug, and I was so upset that I was like, don't touch me, or just sit there, just be here. And she was like, hell no, I'm leaving, right? So that didn't go well. But the phone is definitely my least favorite part of the job. And the reason I want to tell you that is that having a bigger call list is the one thing that we can control that makes the phone easier, right? And obviously appointments are simple. You go hang out with people, most of them feed you, right? They're low key and chill and you make a stupid amount of money selling Cutco. So appointments are easy. The work is the phone. And most reps struggle on the phone because they don't have enough people to call, and that just compounds it, right? But when you have 100, 200, 300 people to call, if someone says no, right, how much does it even matter anymore? Right? Versus if you only have 20 people to call, one says no, and you're like, that's 5% of my list just said no. And even if you don't think in those terms, that's the reality, right? But if you got a couple 100, you're like, I didn't want to see you anyway. You were rude. There's nicer people in this list. I just got to find them, So the main point of that is just to convey, if you've got a couple 100 people on your list, that is the one thing that you have complete control over, and it makes every other part of the job easier and better and less stressful. You guys with me so far? Right? The second thing I want to convey on this is that getting a big list of people to call is not hard or difficult. I'll walk you through my exact program, the exact system I've used. I'll even show you my notebooks that I use when I've done this. But the problem for most sales reps is that this is the part of the job that requires the most self-discipline, okay? The most self-discipline, because we schedule you to come in the office and make phone calls, but you need to have people to call when you come in, and we don't schedule you for time to come in and build your list. You have to do this on your own time, at your own pace. You need to get it done. And it's just like being in a professional job where they say, look, you've got a project, there's a deadline, it needs to be done, but the manager is not going to oversee every step of the project. And this is that for us, right? And a lot of sales reps just, and it's not through any maliciousness, but they allow themselves to not work on it, right? Because it's not scheduled time, and they're kind of in their head like, oh yeah, I should do that, but Netflix is calling, outside is calling, my Xbox is calling, and it just happens. I get that. So here's what I did when I was a rep is I had a meeting with myself every Saturday morning, and I would write this down. This is where I would start. I did it every Saturday morning, and the way I set up my schedule was Monday through Friday. I would start working between 7:30 and 8 a.m. every day. I would work until about 5 o'clock, and then with travel time, I would be home by 6 o'clock. That was about when my wife got home. And I would occasionally, like, she would have 2 days a week that she worked late, and on the days that she worked late, I would work late, and then I'd still be home when she was home. And then the days that she finished working at 5, I would make sure I was home by 6. And that worked out well for me. But Saturday morning, my routine, my system is I would wake up, I guess around 8:30ish, I guess. But I would start working at 9. That I know, right? I would start working at 9, and I would literally go into a private room in my house, and I would close the door, and that was working, right? And all I would do is I would have my resources that I'm going to walk through with you. I would have my notebook. I would have the internet pulled up to like White Pages or Facebook or something like that. And for 2 hours, so from 9 to 11, I was working. Okay. Actually, I misspoke, and I realized something was off as I was saying this. I would wake up at 8 or 8:30. I'd make breakfast, right? I would make breakfast, or like diner style breakfast for my wife. I'd wake her up like 5 minutes before it was ready. Then we'd have breakfast together. And then what I would do, and I knew something sounded off. I don't know how I messed that up because I did it for years. But then she was kind enough to do the dishes after we ate breakfast together. And while she was doing dishes, I would lock myself in my private room for 2 hours. So I was working for 2 hours, and I knew that was the real thing. But anyway, 2 hours, I would work on my call list, and my mission was to never have fewer than 50 new names and numbers. Okay, 50 fresh ones that I could call every single week. Ideally, I was going for 100 every single time, but every single week I'd have at least 50. And for me, the two things I want to convey, it doesn't matter when you do it. It doesn't have to be Saturday morning. That was just my routine that worked really well for me. But what I would do is I would recommend blocking off at least 1 hour every week, at least an hour. And you don't need to like add an hour to your work schedule. Like literally, you can take a time when you wanted to have an appointment, you have a $ in your schedule, assuming you use that system. And literally just instead of doing an appointment with a customer, you book an appointment with yourself to work on your list, right? And you take one appointment time out. But if you add in 50 plus names and numbers to your call list, man, you make more money on that appointment than you would even if you were with a customer, because it's an investment of time. This makes sense, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then if you're in a push week, or you're trying to break a record, or you're working hard for your fast start, or you just want to work the job consistently full time, I would do 2 hours, right? I would do a minimum of an hour for every rep every week. And if you're going after something big, I would do 2 hours. And I'll walk you through my exact system for what I did. Okay. The first thing I should share is how I track my calls, because this will help you out. And then I'll walk you through exactly what I do to build the list. So when I have my call list, I'm just going to write some miscellaneous things here. just so you can see. I do track how many times I call people, and I'm going to make a handout document for this. I don't have it yet, so I'm going to do it on the board for now. But here's what I would do. So when I had a fresh name on my list, I've never called them, I would just have their name and number, right? I've got a list on my paper. And then when I call them the first time, what I do is call one, I double tap. And what that means is we call them. If they don't answer the phone, we immediately hang up and call them back a second time. And a surprising number of people answer on the second call. And I don't leave a voicemail the first time I call them. Just double tap. And a lot of people see your number on caller ID and they call you back. So that's why I don't leave a voicemail, right? And then what I would do on my paper is I would just put a dot. And the dot just tells me that I've called them once. Make sense, yeah? Okay. Now, the second time I call them, I would not double tap. I only double tap one time ever. You don't want to be that guy or that girl that's just blowing people's phone up all the time, you know? But the second time I call them, I leave voicemail number 1. And voicemail number 1 is super simple. It's, hey, this is John Godwin. I have a quick question for you. Give me a call as soon as you can. That's it. Super simple. If it's someone that you don't know very well, you can say like, hey, this is John Godwin. I'm one of your neighbors down the street, or we go to the same church together, or I went to school with your son, Billy. I have a quick question for you. Give me a call as soon as you can. So you can leave something in there to bridge the gap, but the key is I have a question, call me, right? And then what I would do is I would write LM, left message, okay? Third time I call them, I leave voicemail number 2. And voicemail number 2 is the exact same as voicemail number 1. Hey, blah, blah, blah. I have a quick question. Call me as soon as you can. And then what I do is I write a little 2 down there. And that tells me I left 2 messages. Okay? And then on the 4th time I call them, I would leave voicemail number 3 and send them a text. And here's what I'll share with you. The last voicemail that I leave, I let them know that I've been trying to get in touch with them, and this is my last time calling. Okay, so hey, Landon, this is John Godwin. I'm your neighbor down the street. I've been trying to get hold of you for a little bit. This is my last time I'm going to call you, but I do have a question. Please get in touch with me as soon as you can. Phone number, right? And then I'll also send them a text message. And one of the keys that I want to convey is I'm not trying to book the appointment via text. I don't want to get into, oh, I got a job selling Cutco. You don't need to buy us. Too much for a text message. The purpose of the text is to get a phone call. Okay, so I would leave a text, something to the effect of, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with you. Please give me a call. It is time sensitive. But I just want to get them on the phone, and then I'll explain everything on the phone. I don't want to explain it over text, right? And then if I leave the third voicemail, I just write a little done, right? Because I'm done. I'm going to take them off my call list now, yeah? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I'll take notes. So if someone says they're not interested, I'll put an NI. If I schedule the appointment, I write set. If they ask me to call them back, I'll write call back. And what I would do is I have a fresh list every single week. So what I do to start is I'll start. So I've got this 2-hour window for myself on Saturday morning. I start by rewriting my call list. Okay, and I'll show you exactly what this looks like. By the way, just FYI, I call this my families to serve list. Okay, and some of you guys have heard this before, but we used to call it an attack list. And I read a book by Darren Hardy called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster, where one of the things he was conveying is that no one wants to be on someone's attack list. You would not want to be on someone's attack list. And so instead, it's the same concept, but we call it a families to serve list. But what I did is I got a notebook, and it's only, in 2013, it was my attack list. But if I were doing this today, I'd write John Godwin's families to serve list, right? And here's what I would do. Okay, so this one was for January 23rd. This was my first week doing this full time at that time, right? So what I did at the time, I was living in a spot where I was easily accessible to Maryland and Virginia and DC. So I started off, if you can read this, making a list of Maryland people. and I just went straight through. And then I had Virginia people. I went straight through. At this time, the virtual demo was a new thing, so I wanted to do a couple of those just to try it. And then I found some more Virginia people. And this was my call list. And I called it January 23rd was a Sunday. So I called it on Sunday. I called it on Wednesday. Okay. I made my notes. And by the way, if you could actually see that, I should go back and show you. So you can see some of the notes in the margin here. This one's like a wrong number, demo set, some kind of note, left message, callback, not interested. You guys can see the notes that I took. So then what I did after I called it for a week is on February 3rd, I rewrote the list. And what I did is I started with callbacks. And callbacks are people that I've already called, and either they requested a callback or I called them twice, Sunday and Wednesday, they didn't answer. So I'm calling them now number 3 and number 4, right? So I've got my list of callback people, and then I've got Virginia. I found some more callbacks. I've got my Maryland people. I got some more Virginia people. And that was my call list for Sunday and for Wednesday. And then what I would do, and this is me personally, once I've called someone 4 times, they're off the list, right? They're done. They're done. And then, of course, my job now is to get new people in so that my list isn't smaller, right? I take people off, but my list can't be smaller, right? And that's the one mistake a lot of reps make, is that they stop calling people, or they keep calling the same people over and over and over, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, but they're not adding new people into the list, and they get diminishing returns, right? The value is in rewriting the list. So then I got my list for the next week, February 10th. And for this week, we were traveling. I took my wife on a ski trip for 3 or 4 days. So I did a lot more virtuals that week. And then I had, by the way, check this out. This is my Virginia people. Virginia people, Maryland people, and that was all. Okay, just FYI, the one I just showed you, that was the first one that I incorporated referrals into. Okay, the other ones, they were all my power base, people that I personally know. That was my first time incorporating referrals. And you can see how much bigger the list was because of that, right? And then the next one, I've got my list of callbacks. I had a couple people in Richmond and Fredericksburg. And then I had Virginia people. I forget what I was doing that week. I know I didn't do as many appointments, so I didn't build as big a list. But then my next week, check it out, it's big again. So I got virtuals, callbacks. I made a commitment that I wanted to really get good at virtuals that week. Okay, I had a whole list of Virginia people. Virginia, this is all Maryland, right? So as soon as I was back at full-time again, boom, big ass list again. But I just wanted you guys to see that, A, so you can see how I structure my list, and B, so that you can see that everything I'm teaching you, I've done it myself, yeah? But again, so here's what I will share, my last thought on this. There's 2 different competing schools of thought, and neither one is right and neither one is wrong. Personally, I like to go for low-hanging fruit, easy wins, easy appointments. So I'll call somebody 4 times, I leave them 3 voicemails, 1 text message, and then I'm done. They come off my list. But I have to be blunt with you. You can only afford to do that if you are rebuilding your list every week, because if you're consistently taking people off of your list and you're not replacing them with new people, you'll screw yourself. You'll eventually go to 0. That's just how that works, right? I had another guy, Cecil Cummins, and Cecil was a great sales rep. He was my first rep I trained that sold over $100,000. And what he would do is the complete opposite. He never stopped calling people. He would call them every single week until they said yes or no, right? And I'll tell you flat out, he had a couple appointments that are memorable. One of them literally told him, they said, I've been watching your number on the caller ID for months, right? And they were like, you call me every week. I see your number on the caller ID. And they told him, like, I wanted to see how persistent you were. You've earned my business. And they invited him over for an appointment, right? By the way, they bought a signature set. Okay, he had another one that he called 9 times, and the person told him, like, hey, I've been really busy, I've been traveling, but I see that you've called me a bunch of times. I recognize your persistence. Let's do it. That person bought a Cutco kitchen. Okay. So personally, my system works very well for me. I'm very happy with it, but I would have missed that signature set and I would have missed that Cutco kitchen, right? For sure. So I'm not saying my way is the best way. What I do know is that Cecil, just the nature of calling people that many times, there is a diminishing return. So it takes more phone calls to book an appointment, right? So there's a trade-off either way. I like my way better. That's why it's my way. But I just don't want you to think that my way is the only way. And you can, quite frankly, you can call people until they say yes or no. There's nothing to stop you from that. There's no worry in that. It's just a choice. But I like to build up my list every week. Okay? Is this all making sense so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would he still get the voicemails, or would he just call? He wouldn't leave voicemails at all.
I don't know the answer to that.
I can't imagine 9 voicemails would be.
By the way, if you can't hear, Landon's asking, did he leave voicemails every time he called? I don't know the answer, to be honest. I know he had a system, and he did it the same every time. My gut tells me that he was leaving 1 voicemail per week. So he would call them on Sunday and Wednesday, or depending on your office, Monday and Thursday, or whenever you have your phone jams. My gut tells me he was calling twice a week and leaving 1 voicemail a week. And the voicemail would probably always be the same. I've got a quick question, call me back. Yeah. Anyway, so far so good, yeah? So let me give you some tips, and this is like the meat and potatoes, how to build your list. And these documents, by the way, that I'm going to reference if you're watching the recording, your manager has these. So if you just request them from your manager, they can send you all of them. But here's where I'm going to start. In training, I believe all of us do this, we give out a keys to building up your list, okay, or keys to getting more numbers in your first weekend. And I'm just going to read through it with you here. I'll give you the clean one. I don't know what happened there. Looks like coffee. But number 1 is get directories. If you can get access to a church directory, neighborhood directory, homeowners association roster, football, lacrosse, softball, volleyball, club roster, right, whatever that is for you, those things are freaking money, okay? They literally have hundreds of names in them. And I've actually got a couple directories just for the sake of not running off screen for a second time. I'm not going to get them, but I have a book. It's the Annapolis Yacht Club directory, right? Everybody who owns a yacht in the state of Maryland, basically. It's a good list. It's a good list. There's like 400 or 500 people in there. I've also got my mother-in-law's neighborhood directory. I counted it up. There are 272 names and numbers in there. I've also got my wife's, excuse me, that's a lie, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, my sister-in-law, I've got her basketball directory. Okay, and I forget how many that was, but that was freaking amazing. And the nice thing about a roster or a directory is it's just got everybody's name, everybody's number published, and you have the same connection with every one of those people. So when you're making the calls, it's really easy to be consistent, right? So directories are freaking money. And keep in mind, you can get other people's, right? If you have preferably, obviously, your parents are together, obviously, but if they are separate, you have 2 different neighborhoods you can access, right? If you have a presence where you're in your grandparents' neighborhood frequently, you can use that one too. If you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a best friend and you're in the neighborhood frequently, you can use that one too, right? The simple key is, do you have a presence there? What we can't do is just call like every random neighborhood, like, oh, there's nice houses, I'm going to call it. You can't do that, right? That's against the rules. That no good. But if you have a presence there and you're a fixture where you're like, hey, I've been in this neighborhood, we might have run into each other, you might have seen me, right? That is good enough. And you can access multiple neighborhoods that way. Same thing for a church. I definitely do not recommend or condone joining a church for the sole purpose of getting the directory and calling the parishioners. But if you are a member of a church and you are active in that church, you can call all of them because you're a member, even if they go to different services. Same thing for high school. You can call if you have a little brother, little sister, older one. You can get them to give you their school directory, their sports rosters, and you can call those because you have something to bridge the gap. Hey, my little brother plays basketball with your son, or whatever the case may be, right? So you have that connection to bridge the gap there that you can call, Okay. You can ask your parents and your close family members to give you people, and you should ask every single person in your phone. Okay. And I'm looking right now at my records board, and I was reminded this morning, Evan Bradley Lewis, when he came into day 2 of training, he had 220 names and numbers on his list. Okay. And the way he did it is he simply went through his entire phone, his entire contact list, name by name, and every single person in his phone, one of two things happened. Either he was writing them down on his call list because they're married and middle-aged or middle income or higher, or if they were not married, not middle-aged, not middle income or higher, he shot him a text message and it's on the document. Hey, I just got a new job and I need to practice. What's the best time and number to call your mom? Right? If you're texting your aunt who's not married, I would say, what's the best time and number to call one of your friends? You know, super simple. But he sent the text to every single person in his phone that was not married, not middle-aged. And what's funny, it was hilarious. He got 90-something numbers just from that. And to be honest, it wasn't even hard work. Like literally, it's just copy paste. You know, it was tedious. Yes. It took a little time. Yes. It wasn't hard. He wasn't even sweating at the end of it, you know? And the funniest thing was he texted one girl that message the first night, and she didn't respond until the next morning when he happened to be in the office. He was with me, and he started giggling, and I was like, what are you laughing at? And he goes, she just texted me, this girl texted me her mom's number, and then right after it, who is this? Right? And he thought it was hilarious. By the way, I ended up selling a homemaker to that mom. I don't know if the girl ever figured out who he was or not. But the reason I tell you that is that it's easy to psych ourselves out and say, oh man, like what if? Well, the what if is they just don't respond to you or they say no. But that's the same result if you never asked in the first place. But if you don't ask, you can't get a yes, and you never know where it might lead you. So just text them all. What else? Oh, you can ask a couple people. You can ask your friends to give you their family members, obviously. You can ask a couple people to give you a lot. And there are some people that are very socially connected. And personally, I'm not. I'm just not one of those social butterfly kind of people. But my wife is. My wife used to be a professional salsa performer. Like she would get paid to go perform at salsa conferences, which is A, freaking cool. B, she had a Facebook fan page with 500 friends on it. Right? She had a fan page with 500 followers, and I just got her permission to message all of her fans. Okay, so what I did is I pulled up the list, I scripted out a message, and I wrote it as if I was her, but it was me, right? And I was like, hey, my husband John just got this job, blah, 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 blah. And I was, again, just like the text message I mentioned earlier, not trying to book the appointment on Facebook. I was trying to get the phone call. All right, so I just sent him all the ask was, can I have your number so he could call you to tell you about it, right? That was the ask. And I sent that message to 500 people, and I forget how many responded. It wasn't as many as I would have liked, but even still, I got a good number of appointments from it. I would have liked a couple hundred, didn't get a couple hundred, but it worked out, you know? And again, I wasn't sweaty at the end. I wasn't sore at the end. It was tedious, yes, took some time, but it was a good investment of time. My sister-in-law is really well connected. She plays, like, depending on the season and the year, she's been involved in like 6 or 7 different sports. She's active in a youth group. She actually travels a lot. She's lived in California for a couple years. She's got boyfriends all around the country. That's a lie. She's had boyfriends all around the country. Also, I hope she never sees this video. Just putting that out there. But I got her to give me a whole bunch of people. I think I got 20 from her at the first time, and then I got her to give me 50, and then I got her basketball directory, right? And I'm still working on getting more people from her because I have not seen everybody she knows yet. I'm just going through this list, by the way. Beautiful. And by the way, everything I just mentioned, it's on this paper. It's on this paper. The one caveat is on the bottom of it, and this may change. We may update this, probably will update this by the time you see the recording, but it says to use White Pages, and it's got my login. I need to get a new login. We need to upgrade to a premium account or an enterprise account or whatever. So the login for White Pages will probably change, but here's what you can do, and this is worth making a note of because it's not on the document right now, is just go to whitepages.com. And what that is, it's a phone book. You can look people up. And again, just to be clear, what we cannot do is we cannot just look up all the Smiths and then all the Joneses and then all the Browns. Can't do that, right? What else we can't do is be like, oh man, there's a really nice neighborhood down the road. I'm going to look up all the people. Can't do that. What you can do though is if you know someone, like for me, one of the first people I looked up was my high school best friend's mom. Okay, I had this friend Ryan in high school. We were best friends all 4 years. But then after we graduated, we both moved away. We just kind of fell out of touch. I'm sure all of you guys have some of those. And when I was making my list, I was like, man, Ryan's mom knows me. She likes me. She'd be great. I think she loved the product. I need to get Ryan's mom. So I friended Ryan on Facebook, and he actually didn't respond. He didn't respond quickly. We're friends now, but he didn't respond as fast as I wanted him to, right? And so I couldn't really connect with him there. And I ended up going on White Pages, and I looked up, first off, I'll just tell you, I looked up Ryan Hardwick in his town, and White Pages shows me all the people in the house. Okay, so I looked up my friend because I forgot his mom's name, and it showed me all the people in his house. I was like, oh, right, dad, mom, sister. I remember now. And then I clicked on mom's name, and it showed me her phone number, and I called her and got the appointment. That was one of my first virtuals because I was living a couple hours away at that point. You know, that's an example. Okay. You can also look up in your neighborhood. You can look up all of your neighbors, which is freaking wonderful. Okay. Literally, if you go in your neighborhood, do it. And by the way, I'm not going to show this to you just for the sake of time, but here are the steps. If you go on White Pages, there's a button that says reverse address search. Reverse address search. And all you do is type in your address, or mom's address, or dad's address, or grandma's address, or your best friend's address, or your girlfriend or boyfriend's address, right? Type in the address, and it'll pull up your info. But underneath it, there's a thing that'll say neighbors, okay? And there's a little button, you're looking for see more neighbors. And what it'll do is it'll pull up the friggin' neighborhood. It's amazing. And again, to be clear, you can't do this for rando neighborhoods, but if it's a neighborhood where you've got a tie, that's a great way to get the numbers, okay? The last thing though, and again, as of the time of recording this, I'm working on my, basically I had a premium paid account, but then they found out I'm a business and they want me to pay more money is really what it came down to. They're increasing the price by 500%, by the way, that's real. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but that's what happens when you have an enterprise account. But anyway, so I'm working on that. I may do it or change directions. That's why just as the time of recording, I don't have the answer. But what I know for certain that you can do if your office doesn't have a premium account that is paid for is you can go on there and get a free trial. Okay, and I believe in the free trial, you can get either 7 days or 100 names and numbers looked up, which is a great place to start. And then if you decide to pay for it on your own, I could be wrong. I believe that you can get paid access for as little as $10 a month or up to $40 a month. That's what I was paying until they found out I own a business. But anyway, and it'll give you access. So that's an option. And then of course, if your manager has a paid account, you can use theirs if they let you, of course, right? But White Pages is great. Hey, the next thing I'll give you, and again, all of the stuff I just walked through, that was literally just walking through the half sheet. Okay, the second one I'll give you is our Thought Joggers list. I know that all of you got this in your first PSP meeting or your first advanced training, but the way that you use this is you literally sit down and turn off all of your electronics. No cell phone, no computer, nothing that would distract you. That's important because every time we get distracted, it takes the brain 7 minutes to refocus. So every time your phone vibrates, it takes you out for 7 minutes. The phone vibrates 3 times and you've lost half of the hour, right? That matters. So no electronics. And you sit down with a list and all you want to do is come up with is names. No numbers, no how am I going to contact them, no what am I going to say, just names. If a name comes to your head, it goes on the list. And I'll tell you, I did this in 2015. At the time I did this, it was with a rep, Kevin Schofield. He was telling me he was out of people to see. By the way, he was at like $12,000 in sales telling me he was out of people to see. I was at $150,000 in sales, and I was not complaining about being out of people to see. Okay? But I said, you know what? I haven't worked on my list. At this point, I was a district manager. I wasn't selling full-time anymore. So I was like, you know what? I haven't worked on my list in a while, and I want to go out and do some appointments. So let's do it together. So he came in, and for those of you who have been to my office, I was literally sitting at this desk here. I was sitting here. He was on the corner, and we did it together. We just took that memory jogger sheet and went through. I'm just going to walk you through some of the people I got on my list. So I got Comic Shop Joe and Kevin. When I was in high school, I was a comic book nerd. And I was like, you know what? It was bad because I would go there every Wednesday, and I was like, Joe and Kevin would know me if I called them up 7 years later. But I was like, they're on the list. I got a bunch of high school moms. My wife has a friend who is selling jewelry, and I was like, I bought jewelry from her so she can buy knives from me. That's real. Old coworkers, my old personal trainer, old coworker. The vets from Banfield. I had a cat, by the way, very cute. I had two cats named AM and PM. AM passed away, and all of the vets sent me a little sympathy card, which was really cute. But I now was like, I've got all the vets' names, and I just need to call Banfield. You know, don't need their home number. I just can call Banfield and be like, hey, right? So that was great. My pastor from church, two more coworkers, my wife's best friend. I mentioned my wife was a salsa performer, so I got her to give me her favorite DJs. Yeah, Big Vicky is my wife's best friend. Little Vicky is my sister-in-law. High school, my old dance coach. Oh, my mother-in-law's friend, my mom's best friend. I wrote, by the way, Little Vicky. Okay, I wanted her volleyball, her gymnastics. The dude that she studied with, she had a study date with some dude who had like a freaking $1 million home. And I met their parents very briefly, and I was like, I want their number, give, right? Sawyer was her boyfriend that I like. Punky Dude was the boyfriend I did not like. It's real. Right, but anyway, so I just go through. By the way, I want to point out one thing. I put a couple on here that I absolutely did not want to see. Okay, Rolando and Hugh. I think Rolando's rude. Okay, I don't like Rolando. He's one of Carissa's old friends. I don't like the dude. I find him rude. However, he's the perfect person, right? He lives in a freaking $1 million neighborhood. He's super well connected. We went to a house party at their house one time, and literally, I think they invited the entire neighborhood to the house, and like 300 people showed up, right? And I think if I hosted a party, I would invite 300 people, and not 300 would show up, right? This mofo got 300 to show up. He's connected, you know? They love expensive things. Like everything they own is high quality, nice and classy, and they love to cook. In fact, they're an Asian couple, which means that they would probably buy a Signature or an Ultimate because it comes with more advanced tools, and they might buy the entire kitchen. I know for certain they could afford it. Perfect Cutco couple, right? Cutco customer. However, I've not called them because I don't like them. Okay, you can. But here's the thing I want to convey, and the reason I tell you that. It is better to have their name and number and choose not to call them than it is to not have their name and number and feel like you're out of people to call. Okay? It's better to have the name and number and be in a position of choice where I have chosen not to call Rolando and Hugh even though I could. That's better, right? And I do think one of the things that holds a lot of reps up is that they're like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable, so they just don't get the number. Just get the friggin' number, and then you can choose to call or not. By the way, I'm also going to give you this. This is our ultimate memory jogger. By the way, the list I just showed you, that came just from the little one-page doc. But check out this guy. Come on. At the time I made my list, I didn't even have this yet. Yeah, so I made my 2 or 3 or 4 page list just with the one pager. Okay, but your manager can give you this as well. And then here's the last one I'll give you, is the Post-it approach. Okay, and White Pages is wonderful for reaching neighbors. The homeowners association roster directory is great for reaching neighbors. But another thing that you can do to get your neighbors is write up Post-its. Literally go to Target or Walmart, buy a pack of Post-its, and just write up a bunch of them. The message is already scripted out right here. You just write up a bunch of them, and then literally just walk through your neighborhood. You can do this while you're walking your dog or something, and stick them on everybody's door. That's it. And then just make sure you have a decent enough voicemail. It does, by the way, I would not say in your voicemail, hey, this is John Godwin from Cutco, right? Leave a message if you want knives. Don't do that, right? I wouldn't leave any company branding in your voicemail. And also, quite honestly, I mean, you're using your personal cell phone. You don't want your friends and your mom, like, wait a minute, right? Did I call your office? But just have a decent enough voicemail so it's not like, hey, what up, don't leave a message, right? Just something nice so that people can call. You guys get it, you know? You get it because it's real. People do that, right? What up, Duff? But anyway, have a decent enough voicemail and people will call you, which is freaking wonderful. And here's what I'll wrap up with is just 2 closing thoughts. Number 1, for the neighborhood specifically, people ask me all the time, what's better? Should I do the Post-its? Should I do the directory? Should I do white pages? And the answer is all of that, right? All of that. If you could imagine your favorite store talking to an advisor and they say, so should we have a website? Should we have a physical store? Should we have a phone number to call? Should we have email? Like, what should we do? The answer is all of that, right? And if you look at, I'll just use Macy's as an example, but when they run sales, I mean, they buy spots on the newspaper, they buy spots on the radio, sometimes they do TV ads, they'll send out letters in the mail. By the way, they send out catalogs to people that they just got their address that have never called them, you know? They'll hit an email out to their list. Some stores, especially for big sales, like they'll hit their list 3, 4, 5 days in a row, right? And the email, and then you walk in the store and they've got posters and signage everywhere. And the goal of them, their goal is that everybody freaking knows there's the sale. And some people respond to different things. And you'll find that with you too. Some people respond to you calling them and asking on the phone. Some people respond to they don't respond to the voicemail, but they respond to the text. Some people respond to the Post-it note, right? But the goal is that and by the way, of course, when you get referrals and you have their friend texting them, that's a whole nother thing. But the goal is just advertise everywhere, right? My business coach says, be like an octopus with 8 arms. So you're in 8 places all at once. And then different people respond to different things, right? So do all of it. And then the last thing, and I'm going to end where I started, is you have all the resources, all the tools, but I can't do this for you. Your manager can't do this for you. You have to do it yourself. So what I recommend is pick a time now, right? Schedule a time before you disconnect here that you're going to do this. And again, it doesn't need to be a time where you're adding hours into your work schedule. It can be a time where you are already planning on working and you're just making a decision that instead of being in front of a customer, I'm going to meet with myself as an investment of time. But you got this. You got this. And then we'll have another meeting coming up. For right now, as of the recording on this, we're going to have the SEC conference on Tuesday. And then 2 weeks from now on Thursday, we're going to have our alliance meeting for our SC2 push. And we'll have workshops like this all year round, different times of the year, depending on when you're watching it. But come to the next big event, and you can surround yourself with like-minded people and work on these skills at an even higher level than this today. For right now, though, thank you guys for joining us for today. Good luck.